The wedding of the decade was supposed to be Victoria Kensington's crowning achievement, the day she finally erased her son's mistake from history. She had everything planned down to the second, including the ultimate act of cruelty, inviting her son's heartbroken ex-girlfriend just to rub her nose in his new, wealthy happiness. Victoria wanted a witness to her victory. Instead, she invited her own destruction. When the chapel doors swung open, the ex didn't walk in crying. She didn't walk in alone. She walked in with two little boys who wore the groom's face, carrying a secret that would turn the champagne to poison and silence the entire room. This is the story of how a mother's arrogance cost her everything. The envelope was made of heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the kind that cost more than a week's groceries for the average person. It sat on Elodie Hart's modest kitchen counter like a dormant landmine. The calligraphy was embossed in gold leaf, swirling and pretentious, spelling out the names that made her stomach turn: Lucas Kensington and Sophia Vandermeer. Elodie stared at it, her coffee growing cold in her hands. It had been 4 years. 4 years since the rain-soaked night when Lucas, looking pale and pathetic, had sat in her old apartment and told her that he couldn't do it anymore. He hadn't broken up with her because he stopped loving her. He broke up with her because his mother, the formidable Victoria Kensington, had threatened to cut him off from the family fortune if he didn't marry someone with a pedigree. "It's not you, Elodie," Lucas had stammered, avoiding her eyes. "It's just, my world is different. Mother says we need to be realistic." Elodie hadn't begged. She hadn't screamed. She had simply opened the door and told him to leave. She retained her dignity that night, even as her heart shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. But the real blow came 3 weeks later, when the nausea started. By the time she saw the 2 pink lines on the test, Lucas was already in Europe on a healing trip, orchestrated by Victoria, and Elodie's phone number had been blocked from the Kensington estate. Now, this. An invitation. Elodie flipped the card over. There was a handwritten note on the back, penned in jagged, aggressive cursive. "I thought you should see what real happiness looks like. Do come. We've reserved a seat in the back for old time's sake. Victoria." It wasn't an olive branch. It was a dagger. Victoria wanted to make sure Elodie knew she had lost. She wanted to parade the heiress bride, Sophia, in front of the waitress girl Lucas had once lowered himself to date. "Mama?" A small, sleepy voice broke her trance. Elodie turned to see Leo, 4 years old, rubbing his eyes. Standing right behind him was his identical twin, Oliver. They were the splitting image of their father. The same dark, curly hair, the same piercing blue eyes, the same stubborn set of the jaw. But they had Elodie's fire. "I'm here, baby," Elodie said, scooping Leo up. She looked from the boys to the invitation. For 4 years she had struggled. She had worked double shifts, finished her paralegal degree at night, and raised 2 boys on her own without taking a dime from the Kensingtons. She had protected them from Victoria's toxicity. But Victoria had poked the bear. She had invited Elodie to the lion's den, expecting a frightened mouse. Elodie's eyes hardened. She grabbed her phone and dialed her best friend, Sarah, who worked as a stylist for the city's elite. "Sarah," Elodie said, her voice eerily calm. "I need a dress, and I need 2 miniature tuxedos. We're going to a wedding." The Kensington estate was a sprawling manor that looked more like a museum than a home. Manicured hedges lined the driveway, and a fleet of luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces and Ferraris, were already parked in perfect rows. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Inside the grand ballroom, Victoria Kensington held court. She wore a silver gown that shimmered like fish scales, her neck draped in diamonds that had been in the family for generations. She sipped vintage champagne, her eyes scanning the room with the predatory gaze of a hawk. "Is everything perfect, Victoria?" asked Margaret, one of her socialite friends who enjoyed others' misery almost as much as Victoria did. "Impeccable," Victoria purred. "Lucas looks handsome, doesn't he? And Sophia brought a dowry that will merge our shipping lanes with her father's tech empire. It is a merger made in heaven." "And the loose end?" Margaret whispered, raising an eyebrow. "Did you really invite the help?" Victoria laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. "I did. I want her to see this. I want her to realize that she was merely a placeholder, a cautionary tale. I want Lucas to look at her in her cheap department store dress, and then look at Sophia in Vora Wang, and realize I saved him." At the front of the room, Lucas stood by the altar. He looked dashing in his bespoke tuxedo, but his eyes were empty. He went through the motions, smiling when prompted, shaking hands with men he didn't know. He was a man who had been hollowed out. He loved Sophia well enough. She was pleasant, safe, and approved. But she didn't make the world stop turning when she entered a room. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. The guests were taking their seats. The string quartet began to play a soft, lilting melody. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom groaned open. Usually, late arrivals would sneak in, heads bowed, ashamed to interrupt. But the figure standing in the doorway didn't sneak. The room fell silent, starting from the back rows and rippling forward like a wave. Elodie Hart stood framed by the afternoon sunlight. She was not wearing a cheap department store dress. She was wearing a floor-length gown of deep, midnight blue velvet that clung to her curves and left her shoulders bare. It was the color of a stormy sky. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing diamond drop earrings that caught the light. She looked regal, dangerous, and breathtakingly beautiful. But it wasn't the dress that caused the gasps. Holding her left hand was a small boy in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. Holding her right hand was his identical copy. Leo and Oliver walked with a confidence that defied their age. They looked around the room with wide, curious eyes that were a terrifying, undeniable shade of Kensington blue. Victoria dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. The shards scattered, sparkling in a puddle of expensive liquid. But no one looked down. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the woman walking down the center aisle, not as a bride, but as a conqueror. Lucas, hearing the glass break, looked up from the altar. His breath hitched in his throat. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he might faint. He saw Elodie, looking more stunning than he had ever seen her. And then he saw them, the boys. They had his nose. They had his chin. They had the Kensington glare. "Oh my God," whispered the best man, who had been Lucas's college roommate. "Lucas, are those—" Elodie didn't stop. She didn't look at the guests whispering behind their hands. She walked straight toward the section Victoria had mockingly reserved for her, the back row. But she didn't sit there. She stopped halfway down the aisle, right where the families were seated. She locked eyes with Victoria. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her carefully constructed reality was cracking. She had invited a ghost to haunt her son, but the ghost had brought the future with her. "You invited me, Victoria," Elodie said, her voice clear and melodic, carrying through the silent hall. "I thought it would be rude not to introduce you to your grandsons." The word grandsons hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sophia, the bride, stepped out from the side room where she had been waiting to make her entrance. She saw the frozen groom. She saw the woman in blue. She saw the twins. "Lucas!" Sophia's voice was trembling. "Lucas! Who are they?" Lucas couldn't speak. He stepped off the altar, stumbling slightly. He walked past his mother, who was clutching her pearls as if they were a lifeline. He walked toward Elodie and the boys. He fell to his knees in front of Leo and Oliver. Leo tilted his head. "Mummy, is this the bad man?" The innocence of the question was more devastating than any insult. Elodie looked down at the man she had once loved, the man who had let his mother throw her away like trash. "No, Leo," Elodie said softly, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "He's not a bad man. He's just a man who didn't fight for us." Victoria snapped out of her shock, her face twisted into a mask of fury. She marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone floor. "How dare you?" Victoria hissed, though her voice wavered. "How dare you bring these hired actors into my house on this day? This is a shakedown. Security." "Security?" Elodie laughed. She reached into a clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a weapon. It was a document. "I brought the DNA results, Victoria, and the birth certificates. You see, I knew you'd say that. You're nothing if not predictable." She held the papers out, not to Victoria, but to Lucas. "I didn't come to stop the wedding," Elodie said, her eyes shifting to the horrified bride, Sophia. "I came because you sent an invitation to my house to mock me. You wanted to show me what I missed out on. So I returned the favor. I wanted to show you what you missed out on." She gestured to the boys. "Meet Leo and Oliver. They turn 4 next week. They are smart, they are kind, and they are Kensingtons. And until today they didn't know you existed." Lucas took the papers with shaking hands. He looked at the birth dates. He did the math. It aligned perfectly with the breakup. "You knew?" Lucas looked up at his mother. The realization was dawning on him, a dark and terrible storm. "Mother, you monitored her. You told me she moved away. You told me she found someone else immediately." "She did!" Victoria shrieked, desperate to regain control. "She's a gold digger, Lucas. She waited until today to trap you." "I don't want your money, Victoria," Elodie cut in, her voice icy. "I make my own. I own my own firm now. I drove here in my own car. I'm here to show you that you didn't break me. You built me." The murmur in the crowd was turning into a roar. Phones were out. People were recording. The wedding of the century was turning into the scandal of the decade. Sophia, the bride, looked at Victoria, then at Lucas, who was still on his knees, weeping as he looked at his sons. Sophia threw her bouquet on the ground. "I think," Sophia said, her voice cutting through the noise, "that the wedding is off." But the drama was far from over, because as Lucas reached out to touch Oliver's hand, the little boy pulled back and hid behind Elodie's velvet dress. "I don't know you," Oliver said. It was a rejection that hurt more than the breakup 4 years ago. And watching from the sidelines, Victoria's face went from angry to terrified. She realized that by trying to humiliate Elodie, she had just exposed her own lies to her son, her social circle, and her investors. And Elodie? She just smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. "Come on, boys," Elodie said, turning around. "We've seen the show. It's time to go get ice cream." "Wait!" Lucas screamed, scrambling to his feet. "Elodie, wait, please!" He ran after her, leaving his mother and his bride standing in the wreckage of the perfect day. The gravel of the driveway crunched under Lucas's polished dress shoes as he sprinted past the shocked valet drivers. The heat of the afternoon sun beat down on his neck, contrasting sharply with the cold dread pooling in his stomach. "Elodie!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Elodie, stop! Please!" Elodie had just finished buckling Leo and Oliver into their booster seats in the back of her sleek, black SUV. She paused, her hand on the driver's door handle. She didn't look frightened. She looked exhausted, as if she were dealing with a persistent telemarketer rather than the father of her children. She turned slowly. "Go back inside, Lucas. Your mother is probably having an aneurysm. She needs you." "I don't care about her," Lucas panted, coming to a halt a few feet away. He looked at the tinted back windows of the car, trying to catch a glimpse of the boys. "I care about... Are they really?" "Don't ask questions you already know the answer to," Elodie cut him off, her voice sharp. "You saw them. You saw their eyes. You know." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the perfect groom styling. 4 years, Elodie. 4 years. Why didn't you tell me? I would have left everything. I would have come for you." Elodie laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She stepped away from the car, closing the distance between them, just enough to lower her voice so the children wouldn't hear. "You would have come," she mocked gently. "Lucas, I called you. The night I found out. I called the estate. I called your cell. I even wrote a letter, a physical letter, and sent it to your apartment in the city." Lucas shook his head, confusion clouding his eyes. "I never got a call. I never got a letter. I was in Paris. Mother said you had changed your number." "Your mother," Elodie said, spitting the words out like poison, "answered my call on the estate line. She told me that if I ever tried to contact you again, she would bury me in legal fees until I was homeless. She said you had moved on, that you were disgusted by our fling. She returned my letter unopened, Lucas, with 'Return to sender' stamped in red ink." Lucas staggered back as if he'd been punched. The memories of that summer in Paris flooded back, how his mother had constantly hovered, managing his phone, filtering his mail, telling him to focus on healing. "She stole my sons from me," Lucas whispered, horror dawning on his face. "She tried to steal them from me too," Elodie said, her eyes flashing. "Do you know how hard it is to raise twins alone while putting yourself through law school? Do you know what it's like to buy formula with spare change while watching your ex-boyfriend on the news, attending galas on yachts?" "Law school." Lucas looked at her, really looking at her for the first time. The velvet dress, the confidence, the car. You're a lawyer?" "I own Hart and Associates," Elodie said with a grim sense of satisfaction. "I specialize in corporate fraud and family law. I built my life from the ashes your mother left behind. I don't need your money, Lucas, and I certainly don't need your pity." She turned back to the car door. "Wait." Lucas stepped forward, reaching out but not daring to touch her. "What happens now? You can't just show me them and leave. They're my sons." Elodie opened the door and looked back over her shoulder. The sunlight caught the diamond in her earring, making it flash like a warning light. "You made your choice 4 years ago, when you let your mother decide your future," she said. "You wanted a pedigree, Lucas. You wanted the easy life. Well, you have it. Go marry Sophia. Merge your companies. Be the good little Kensington heir." "I can't marry her now," Lucas cried out. "Elodie, I still—" "Don't!" She stopped him. "Don't you dare say you still love me. You don't love me. You love the idea of defying your mother, but you're too weak to actually do it. Goodbye, Lucas." She slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, a powerful, deep rumble. As she drove away, kicking up dust, Lucas stood alone in the driveway, watching the taillights fade. He felt a hollowness in his chest that no amount of money could fill. He turned around and looked back at the manor. The wedding guests were spilling out onto the terrace, whispering, pointing. Lucas's sadness evaporated, replaced by a white-hot rage he had never felt before. He marched back toward the venue. He wasn't going to the altar. He was going to war. Inside the bridal suite, Victoria was pacing, frantically barking orders into her phone. "Get the PR team on the line. Tell them it was a prank, a disgruntled employee. I don't care what you have to say, just kill the story." She slammed the phone down as Lucas kicked the door open. The wood splintered near the lock. Victoria jumped, clutching her chest. "Lucas, thank God. Listen, we can salvage this. Sophia is upset, but her father is a pragmatist. If we issue a statement denying paternity—" "Shut up," Lucas said. His voice was dangerously quiet. Victoria froze. "Excuse me?" I said. "Shut up." Lucas walked into the room. He looked at the woman who had controlled his every breath for 30 years. You knew she was pregnant." Victoria straightened her spine, her eyes narrowing. "I protected you. She was a waitress, Lucas. A nobody. She would have dragged you down into mediocrity. I did what was necessary to preserve this family's legacy." "Legacy?" Lucas laughed, a manic sound. "You talk about legacy. You just ensured that your grandsons, the only heirs to this family, will grow up hating you. You returned her letter. You threatened her." "I bought you a future," Victoria shrieked. "I gave you the world." "You gave me a cage," Lucas spat. He ripped the boutonniere from his lapel and threw it on the floor. "The wedding is off. The merger is dead. And Mother? If you ever try to come near me or those boys, I will burn this house to the ground." He turned and walked out, leaving Victoria Kensington alone in a room full of unused flowers, realizing for the first time that her control had finally snapped. The scandal didn't just break, it exploded. By the next morning, the video of Elodie walking down the aisle with the twins had been viewed 10 million times. The hashtags, "Nah, the waitress revenge," and Kensington twins were trending globally. The internet, usually a divided place, was almost unanimously on Elodie's side. The image of the regal mother protecting her children against the evil queen, Victoria, was too perfect to resist. Elodie sat in her office at Hart & Associates 3 days later. It was a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Her desk was covered in files, but her eyes were glued to the television mounted on the wall. A news anchor was speaking gravely. Kensington Industries stock has plummeted 12% since the disastrous wedding event on Saturday. Investors are questioning the stability of the leadership after CEO Victoria Kensington was accused of concealing her own grandchildren. Meanwhile, Lucas Kensington has reportedly moved out of the family estate and is staying at the St. Regis Hotel. Elodie muted the TV. She felt a headache building behind her eyes. She hadn't done this for fame. She had done it for closure. But now, the beast she had poked was waking up. Her intercom buzzed. "Ms. Hart, there's a visitor for you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." "I'm not taking press interviews, Sarah," Elodie sighed. "It's not the press," her assistant's voice lowered. "It's Sophia Vandermeer." Elodie's pen froze in midair. The bride. "Send her in," Elodie said, her muscles tensing. She expected a screaming match. She expected a slap. She prepared herself for a catfight. But when the door opened, Sophia looked nothing like the radiant bride from Saturday. She wore huge sunglasses, a trench coat, and a scarf wrapped around her head. She looked like a spy on the run. Sophia closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. She removed her glasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. "I didn't come to yell at you," Sophia said quietly. Elodie gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Then why are you here? To ask me to apologize for ruining your big day?" "My big day was a business transaction," Sophia said, dropping into the chair. I knew Lucas didn't love me. Not really. But I thought he was decent. I thought his family was honorable. She looked up at Elodie. You saved me, Elodie. Elodie blinked, surprised. I did? If I had married him, and then found out about the twins later, or if I had children with him and Victoria tried to control them. Sophia shuddered. I saw the way she looked at your boys, like they were property, like they were livestock to be branded. Sophia reached into her designer bag and pulled out a flash drive. She slid it across the mahogany desk. What is this? Elodie asked. My father was furious about the embarrassment, Sophia explained. He wanted to destroy the Kensingtons. So, he had his private investigators dig into Victoria's past dealings. We were going to use it for leverage to get our investment back. Sophia paused. But I think you need this more than I do. Elodie picked up the drive. What's on it? Proof, Sophia whispered. Proof that Victoria Kensington didn't just hide your letters. She paid off a doctor to falsify records. 4 years ago, when you went to the clinic for your first ultrasound, the clinic was owned by a subsidiary of Kensington Corp. She accessed your medical files illegally. She knew the gender of the babies before you did. She was tracking you, Elodie. For years. A chill ran down Elodie's spine. The idea that Victoria had been watching her, lurking in the shadows while Elodie struggled to pay rent, was nauseating. Why give this to me? Elodie asked. Because she's not done, Sophia warned. I heard my father talking to his lawyers. Victoria is planning to file for emergency custody. She's going to claim you are mentally unstable and that you staged the wedding interruption to emotionally damage the children. She's going to try to take them, Elodie. She needs heirs to stabilize the stock price. Lucas is refusing to talk to her, so she's going to bypass him and go straight for the boys. Elodie's hand closed tight around the flash drive. Her knuckles turned white. The sadness she had felt earlier vanished, replaced by the cold, sharp instinct of a wolf protecting her cubs. Let her try, Elodie said, her voice dropping an octave. I know the law better than she does, and this time I'm not the scared 20-year-old girl she bullied. Be careful. Sophia stood up, buttoning her coat. She has judges in her pocket. She has the media. She has billions. She has money, Elodie corrected, standing up to shake Sophia's hand. But I have the truth, and thanks to you, I have the weapon. As Sophia left, Elodie plugged the flash drive into her computer. She watched the files populate the screen, emails, bank transfers, surveillance logs. It was all there. Just then, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Ms. Hart, a deep, smooth voice spoke. This is Arthur Sterling, representing Mrs. Victoria Kensington. Elodie smiled a dangerous smile. She knew the name, the most expensive shark in the city. Mr. Sterling, Elodie replied calmly. I was expecting your call. We are filing an emergency motion for temporary custody of the minor children, Leo and Oliver Hart, on behalf of their grandmother, the lawyer stated, his tone bored and arrogant. We are alleging parental alienation and emotional distress. We expect you to surrender the children's passports by 5 p.m. today. I won't be doing that, Elodie said. Then we will see you in court tomorrow morning. And Miss Hart, bring a toothbrush. Mrs. Kensington intends to petition for your incarceration for harassment. I'll see you there, Arthur, Elodie said. And tell Victoria to wear something comfortable. It's going to be a long day. She hung up the phone. She looked at the picture of Leo and Oliver on her desk, their smiling faces covered in chocolate ice cream. Victoria wanted a fight. She wanted a courtroom drama. Elodie cracked her knuckles. Okay, Grandma. Let's play. The courtroom was packed. It seemed Victoria Kensington had not only hired the most aggressive legal team in the state, but had also leaked the hearing time to the press. She wanted a spectacle. She wanted the world to see her rescue her poor, neglected grandchildren from the clutches of a vengeful woman. Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table, looking the picture of elegant grief. She wore a modest black suit, her pearls replaced by a simple gold chain. She dabbed at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Beside her sat her lead counsel, Mr. Montgomery, a man known as the Butcher in legal circles for his ability to tear families apart. Elodie sat alone at the defense table. She didn't need a lawyer. She was one. She wore a sharp, crimson blazer that signaled she wasn't there to mourn. She was there to fight. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Keller, a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance of courtroom theatrics, swept in. She looked at the overflowing gallery and frowned. "This is a family court, not a circus. One outburst and I clear the room. Mr. Montgomery, you're opening?" Montgomery stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked toward the judge, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Your Honor, we are here today because a tragedy has occurred. 2 innocent children, heirs to one of the country's most significant legacies, have been hidden away in poverty by a mother whose judgment is clouded by bitterness. Ms. Hart withheld the existence of these children from their father and grandmother for 4 years. She lives in a 2-bedroom rental in a high-crime district. She works long hours. We have witness testimony that suggests she leaves the children with unlicensed neighbors. We are asking for immediate temporary custody to be granted to Mrs. Victoria Kensington, where the boys can receive the security, education, and medical care they deserve." He turned to look at Elodie with a sneer. "These children are Kensingtons. They should not be punished for their mother's pride." Elodie didn't flinch. When it was her turn, she stood up slowly. "Your Honor," Elodie said, her voice steady. "Mr. Montgomery speaks of legacy and heirs. I speak of children. Leo and Oliver are happy, healthy, and loved. They don't know who the Kensingtons are, and frankly, up until 3 days ago, the Kensingtons didn't care to know who they were." "Objection," Montgomery barked. "My client didn't know they existed." "Didn't she?" Elodie challenged. "I would like to submit Exhibit A." She walked to the bench and handed over a stack of documents, the printouts from Sophia's flash drive. "These are invoices," Elodie explained, turning to face the gallery. "Dated 4 years ago. Paid by a shell company owned by Victoria Kensington. They are payments to Dr. Aris, my former OB-GYN, for consulting fees. The dates coincide exactly with my prenatal checkups. Mrs. Kensington knew I was pregnant. She knew I was carrying twins. She knew their gender. And she chose to hide that information from her own son to ensure he went through with a business merger." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Victoria's face went pale. She leaned over and hissed something at Montgomery. "This is fabricated," Montgomery shouted. "Hearsay." "I have the bank routing numbers, Your Honor," Elodie said calmly. "But if you need a character witness to establish Mrs. Kensington's fitness as a guardian, I would like to call the boy's father to the stand." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Lucas Kensington walked in. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He looked like a man who had walked through fire. Victoria's eyes widened. She stood up halfway. "Lucas, don't you dare!" "Sit down, Mrs. Kensington," Judge Keller snapped. Lucas took the stand. He looked at his mother with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Mr. Kensington," Elodie asked, treating him like a stranger, "did you know about your sons?" "No," Lucas said, his voice raspy. "I didn't." Would you say your mother is a fit guardian for Leo and Oliver? The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Lucas looked at Victoria. He thought about the years of manipulation, the lies, the way she had treated him like an asset rather than a son. No, Lucas said clearly. My mother loves control more than she loves people. She doesn't want custody of Leo and Oliver because she loves them. She wants them because her stock prices are dropping and she needs good PR. She views them as props. Victoria gasped, clutching her chest theatrically, but no one was buying it. And what about you, Mr. Kensington? Elodie asked, her eyes softening just a fraction. Do you want custody? Lucas looked at Elodie. He saw the strength in her jaw, the way she stood, protecting their children's future. I have no right to ask for custody, Lucas said, shocking everyone. I wasn't there. I didn't protect them. Elodie did. She is the only parent they know. Taking them from her would be cruel. I just want the chance to earn my way into their lives. Not as a Kensington, just as their dad. Judge Keller nodded, scribbling on her notepad. She looked over her glasses at Victoria. Mrs. Kensington, your motion for emergency custody is denied. Furthermore, based on the evidence of medical privacy violation, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. You are to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Hart and her children until a full investigation is conducted. This is an outrage, Victoria screamed, losing her composure entirely. I am Victoria Kensington. You can't do this to me. I just did. Judge Keller slammed the gavel. Court adjourned. The victory felt good, but as Elodie walked out of the courthouse, the adrenaline crashed. She was exhausted. The flashing cameras outside were blinding, but a large hand appeared, shielding her eyes. It was Lucas. He guided her through the throng of reporters to her car. Thank you, she said stiffly, unlocking the door. I meant what I said in there, Lucas said, standing on the sidewalk. I don't want to take them from you, but I want to know them, Elodie. Please. Elodie looked at him. He had blown up his life for her in that courtroom. He had publicly humiliated his mother and destroyed his own inheritance. Saturday, she said finally. We go to the park at 10 a.m. If you're late, don't bother coming. I'll be there at 8, Lucas promised. But when Saturday came, the reality of Lucas's new life hit him hard. He had been cut off, completely. Victoria had frozen his trust funds, locked him out of the corporate accounts, and even had his company car repossessed. For the first time in his 30 years of life, Lucas Kensington had $400 in his pocket and no credit cards. He arrived at the park at 9:30 a.m., having taken 3 buses because he couldn't afford a taxi and didn't know how to use the subway. He was sweating, his shirt stained, carrying a cheap plastic bag with 2 toy trucks he had bought at a discount store. Elodie was already there, sitting on a bench, watching Leo and Oliver chase ducks by the pond. She saw Lucas approaching, disheveled, anxious, looking nothing like a billionaire. She didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. She just pointed to the empty space on the bench. You took the bus? She asked, eyeing his crumpled ticket stub sticking out of his pocket. Yeah, Lucas laughed nervously. It's louder than a limo. Why didn't you drive? Mother took the cars, Lucas admitted, looking down at his sneakers. She took everything, Elodie. The apartment, the cards, the access. I'm currently sleeping on my friend Dave's couch. I have to find a job on Monday. Elodie stared at him. She had expected him to fight for the kids using his money. She hadn't expected him to become poor to do it. Why didn't you just apologize to her? Elodie asked. She would have given it all back. Because, Lucas watched the twins running in circles. I'd rather be poor and be able to look at them without shame than be rich and be her puppet. I missed their first steps, Elodie. I missed their first words. I'm not missing anything else. Mommy! Leo came running up, holding a feather. He stopped when he saw Lucas. He narrowed his eyes. Is that the crying man? Lucas winced. Hi, Leo. Yeah, I was the crying man. I'm Lucas. Leo looked at the plastic bag. What's that? I brought these. Lucas handed the bag over awkwardly. Leo opened it. He pulled out the cheap plastic trucks. They weren't the expensive battery-operated ones Victoria would have bought. They were simple, push-along toys. Leo's face lit up. Ollie, look! Dump trucks! Oliver ran over, and within seconds, the two boys were in the dirt, making engine noises, completely accepting the gift. Lucas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Tears pricked his eyes again. They like them. They're for Lucas, Elodie said softly. They don't care about price tags. That's a lesson your mother never learned. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. She broke it in half and handed a piece to him. Eat, she commanded. You look like you haven't eaten since the wedding. Lucas took the sandwich. It was peanut butter and jelly. It tasted better than any steak he'd ever had at a Michelin star restaurant. So, Elodie said, watching the boys play. You need a job? I have a business degree from Wharton, Lucas said, but my mother has likely blacklisted me from every major firm in the city. Good, Elodie said. Corporate life makes you miserable anyway. My firm needs a paralegal. It pays garbage, the boss is demanding, and you'll have to fetch your own coffee. Lucas looked at her, stunned. You'd hire me. I need someone who understands corporate fraud to help me sift through the documents Sophia gave me, Elodie said. We're going to sue your mother, Lucas. Not for custody, for damages, for emotional distress, for the illegal wiretapping of my medical records. We're going to take her down. Are you in? Lucas looked at his sons playing in the dirt with the cheap trucks. He looked at the woman who had built a fortress to protect them. He felt a fire ignite in his belly, not of rage, but of purpose. I'm in, Lucas said. When do I start? Monday at 8 a.m. Elodie stood up. Don't be late. And Lucas? Yeah? You're good with the boys, she said. Just don't disappear again. Never, Lucas vowed. But as they watched the boys play, a black sedan slowly rolled past the park entrance. The window was tinted, but the license plate was familiar. Victoria wasn't done. She had lost the legal battle, but she was about to start a different kind of war. And this time, she wasn't targeting the parents. She was targeting the boys' curiosity. As Lucas and Elodie packed up to leave, Oliver lagged behind. A window on the sedan rolled down. A hand extended, holding something shiny, a tablet, playing the boys' favorite cartoon. Hey there, little one, a voice cooed from the car. It wasn't Victoria, it was a hired stranger. Do you want to see the rest of the show? Oliver took a step toward the car. Oliver, Elodie shouted, turning around. The sedan's tires screeched as it sped away, leaving Oliver standing confused on the sidewalk. Lucas sprinted over, scooping his son up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the retreating car. She's trying to snatch them, Lucas realized, his blood running cold. She's not going to wait for the courts. Elodie's face hardened into stone. Then we stop playing defense. It's time to go on the offense. The black sedan speeding away from the park wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. Victoria Kensington had crossed the invisible line that separates a manipulative matriarch from a criminal. She had targeted the children. For Elodie and Lucas, the time for defensive maneuvering in courtrooms was over. They couldn't wait for the slow grind of the legal system while Victoria operated in the shadows. They had to cut off the head of the snake, and they had to do it now. The war room was the cramped, fluorescent-lit break room at Hart & Associates. It smelled of stale coffee and microwave popcorn, a stark contrast to the mahogany boardrooms Lucas was accustomed to. But as he sat at the wobbly plastic table, wearing a t-shirt and jeans, Lucas looked more alive, more formidable than he ever had in a three-piece bespoke suit. He was poring over a labyrinth of financial records, his eyes scanning the digital ledgers with a predator's focus. Elodie paced the small room, her arms crossed, the adrenaline of the park incident still humming in her veins. "She's vulnerable," Lucas said suddenly, his finger stabbing at the laptop screen. He looked up, his eyes bright with a dangerous intensity. "Look at this, Elodie. She's been sloppy. Arrogant." Elodie leaned over his shoulder. "What am I looking at?" "Liquidity," Lucas explained, his voice low and urgent. "She's been leveraging the company's operating capital to cover personal losses from bad investments in offshore shipping. She's bleeding money, and she's trying to plug the holes before the quarterly audit." He scrolled down the spreadsheet. "If the board finds out she's been using company assets to fund her personal vendettas, including the surveillance on you, the bribes, the private investigators, they won't just fire her, they'll destroy her." "We know she did it," Elodie said, frustration tightening her jaw. "But knowing it and proving it are two different things. We need the authorization logs. We need to link the money to the orders, and those are on her private server at the estate." Lucas nodded grimly. "I know the passcode. Or I did. It's her birthday. She's too narcissistic to change it. She believes she's untouchable." "But you can't get on the property," Elodie countered, the reality of their situation settling in. "The restraining order works both ways, Lucas. If you set foot on the estate, she'll have you arrested for trespassing before you can even touch a keyboard. She's probably got security watching the perimeter specifically for you." "I won't go," Lucas said, a grim smile touching his lips. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but of tactical precision. "But I know someone who still has access, someone who knows the layout, knows the schedule, and right now hates my mother almost as much as we do." Elodie raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Sophia." Later that night, the phone rang in the lavish, lonely penthouse apartment of Sophia Vandermeer. The jilted bride was sitting on her velvet sofa, a glass of expensive red wine in her hand, staring blankly at a pile of returned wedding gifts that were waiting to be shipped back. The silence of the apartment was deafening. She saw the caller ID and hesitated. Then, with a sigh of resignation, she answered. "Hello?" "Sophia, it's Lucas." The sound of his voice brought a fresh wave of pain, but it was duller now, replaced by a simmering anger. "You have a lot of nerve calling me, Lucas, after everything." "I know," Lucas said, his voice stripped of any excuses. "And I'm sorry. Truly, I never wanted to hurt you. But I need your help to stop her. She tried to grab Oliver at the park today. She tried to kidnap my son." The silence on the other end was heavy. Sophia set her wine glass down on the marble coaster with a sharp clink. The image of the little boy with the curly hair flashed in her mind, the innocent bystander in Victoria's game. "She went after the kids?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes. She's escalating. We need the server logs from her study to prove she's embezzling funds. If we don't stop her, she'll take them, Sophia. You know she will." Sophia stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city lights. She thought about how Victoria had treated her, not as a daughter-in-law, but as a merger acquisition. She thought about the cold, calculating look in Victoria's eyes when she talked about legacy. You still have your keycard to the estate, don't you? Lucas pressed gently. She wouldn't have revoked it yet. She still thinks she can smooth things over with your father to save the merger. Sophia looked at her reflection in the glass. For the first time in weeks, she didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone who was ready to fight back. I'm on my way, Sophia said. The takedown was scheduled for the annual Kensington Shareholders' Gala. It was the crown jewel of the social season, a black tie affair held in the very same grand ballroom where the disastrous wedding had taken place only a week prior. The irony was intentional. Victoria wanted to overwrite the memory of the scandal with a display of unshakable power. The room was filled with the city's elite, titans of industry, politicians, and nervous investors holding champagne flutes. Victoria Kensington stood on the raised stage, bathed in a spotlight that made her gold gown shimmer like armor. She looked imperious, untouched by the chaos swirling around her family name. The rumors of family discord are greatly exaggerated, Victoria lied into the microphone, her voice smooth as silk. She flashed a practiced, dazzling smile at the crowd. My son is merely taking a sabbatical to focus on personal projects. The Kensington legacy is unshakable. In fact, the company is stronger than ever, and our projections for the next quarter are... She never finished the sentence. Suddenly, the massive LED screen behind her, which had been displaying the Kensington Industries logo, flickered violently. The golden crest dissolved into static. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victoria turned, confusion marring her perfect composure. In place of the logo, a video began to play. It was grainy, black and white security footage, time-stamped from 3 weeks ago. It showed Victoria in her private office, her face twisted in a mask of fury as she screamed at a cowering man in a suit. The audio, piped through the ballroom's high-fidelity speakers, was crystal clear. I don't care if it's illegal. Falsify the reports. If the board finds out I used the pension fund to pay off the bribe for the judge, we're ruined. Do it! The ballroom gasped as one entity. The sound was like the air being sucked out of the room. Victoria froze, her eyes wide with horror, as she watched her own digital ghost confess her crimes to the people she had spent a lifetime deceiving. Then, the image changed. It wasn't video anymore. It was data. A spreadsheet, the damning evidence Lucas and Elodie had found, corroborated by the logs Sophia had extracted, filled the screen. Rows of red highlight showed millions of dollars siphoned from the company accounts, payments to private investigators, bribes to court clerks, hush money. Victoria stood paralyzed on stage, a golden statue of ruin. She looked out into the blinded darkness of the crowd, searching for an ally, but finding only shock and judgment. Then she saw them. Standing at the very back of the room, near the heavy oak doors, was a triad of justice. Elodie stood in the center, wearing a sharp white suit that glowed in the dim light. Beside her was Lucas, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. And flanking them was Sophia Vandermeer, holding a tablet, her finger hovering over the send button that had just blasted the evidence to every news outlet, regulatory body, and shareholder in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucas's voice boomed from the back of the room. He didn't need a microphone. The authority in his voice carried to the rafters. As a major shareholder of Kensington Industries, I call for an immediate vote of no confidence. Seconded, shouted a silver-haired man near the front, Sophia's father, looking at Victoria with utter disdain. Victoria grabbed the microphone stand, her knuckles white. Panic cracked her voice. No, this is a lie. This is a deep fake. This is a conspiracy to... Security guards, the very ones she had hired to keep Elodie out, began to move toward the stage. But they weren't there to protect her. 2 police officers, grim-faced and serious, stepped out from the wings, parting the sea of stunned guests. Victoria Kensington, the lead officer announced, his voice amplified by the stunned silence of the room. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, corporate fraud, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping." As the officers mounted the stairs and placed her in handcuffs, the illusion of Victoria's power shattered completely. She looked small, old, and desperate. She frantically scanned the room until her eyes locked on Lucas. "Lucas!" she screamed as they began to drag her away, her dignity forgotten. "I did this for you. Everything I did was for you. You are nothing without me. Do you hear me? Nothing." Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He watched his mother being led out of his life, the toxicity finally excised. He turned to Elodie, his eyes clear and calm for the first time in years. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. Elodie squeezed his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. "Ready." 6 months later. The Kensington estate was sold quietly to a developer. The proceeds went almost entirely to repaying the pension fund Victoria had raided and settling the lawsuits. The museum, as Elodie had called it, was gone. Lucas didn't move back into a mansion. He didn't want marble floors or gold leaf ceilings. Instead, he and Elodie bought a messy, beautiful farmhouse on the edge of town. It had a wraparound porch that needed painting, a big yard that needed mowing, and it was perfect. It was a Sunday afternoon, golden and lazy. The smell of charcoal and barbecue sauce filled the air. Lucas stood at the grill in the backyard, flipping burgers with the concentration of a bomb disposal expert. He was wearing an apron Elodie had bought him as a joke, which read, "Kiss the Cook," in bold red letters. Elodie sat on the porch swing, a glass of lemonade in her hand, watching the scene unfold. Leo and Oliver were tumbling in the grass, their laughter ringing out like bells. They were wrestling with a new addition to the family, a clumsy, enthusiastic golden retriever puppy they had named Justice. "Hey!" Lucas called out, wiping a smudge of soot from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Burgers are ready. Who's hungry?" "Me! Me!" The twins scrambled up, abandoning the puppy to race toward the picnic table. Elodie walked over to Lucas, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind and resting her chin on his shoulder. "You know, for a former billionaire heir, you flip a decent burger." "Ex-billionaire," Lucas corrected her with a grin, turning in her arms to kiss her forehead. "I'm just a junior paralegal now, but the benefits package is much better." He looked past her, at the boys eating with messy faces, safe and free. They hadn't gotten the happily ever after of fairy tales. They had fights about electricity bills. They had sleepless nights when the boys had nightmares. They had the messy, chaotic, beautiful reality of life. And as Lucas held Elodie close, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he knew he wouldn't trade this life for all the diamonds in Victoria's vault. The mistake Victoria had tried so hard to erase had become the only thing that mattered. In the end, the waitress hadn't just survived the Queen. She had rewritten the history of the kingdom. And that is how a cruel mother's arrogance led to her own absolute downfall, proving that while money can buy silence, it cannot buy loyalty. Lucas and Elodie's story is a powerful reminder that the strongest family isn't the one with the most zeros in the bank account, but the one that fights for each other when the world turns its back. If you enjoyed this story of karma, justice, and second chances, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this with a friend who needs a little drama today, and hit subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.